Good evening. My name is Brian Lewis. I have the honor of serving as the 28th president of Transylvania University, and on behalf of our community of learners, I welcome you to the latest installment in the William R. Kenan Jr. Lecture Series. I'm so glad to see you all here, and I know you're as excited as I am to hear from such a distinguished guest tonight. Someone who will so appropriately engage and inspire us in keeping with this year's Creative Intelligence theme of Days of Our Beginnings. Now, as some of you might know, the series was started in 1985 by my distinguished predecessor and dear friend, President Charles Shearer. The director of the Creative Intelligence series has coordinated the Kenan Lecture for the past several years, so many thanks to our current director, Professor Kenan. Now, past lecturers, oh yes, give it up for Kenan, please, yes. Our past lecturers include distinguished novelists, historians, Nobel Prize-winning physicists, peacemakers, the principal investigator on the NASA Mars rover project, Academy Award-nominated actors, international opera stars, the first woman to serve as president of Ireland, the highest-ranking defector from the Soviet Union, an Emmy Award-winning author and journalist, and now a National Book Award-winning poet. Now, the William R. Kenan Jr. Lecture Series is funded by a grant from the William R. Kenan Jr. Charitable Trust. Mr. Kenan was born in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1872. He attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he found his passion for chemical and mechanical engineering. He later became president of the Flagler System, the Traders Paper Company, and the Western Block Company. He owned Randley Farm, where he had a prized Jersey herd that was nationally known. So clearly something of a Renaissance man. And he gave a significant portion of his estate to establish a trust for educational purposes. And after his death, that charitable trust started its formal grant-making program. The trust has contributed to conversations about the pressing issues of the day, and it has focused on initiatives that improve literacy, college preparedness, contributions to community building and economic vitality, and that inspire a sense of collective purpose and shared humanity. We are grateful for the generous support of the Trust and of the many friends of Transylvania University who have enabled this series of programs over the decades. We look forward to continuing this marvelous tradition with unique opportunities for you to interact with some of the most compelling people on the planet. To that end, I'm delighted to bring to the podium Dr. Jeremy Payton, Professor of Spanish and Chair of our Humanities Division, who will introduce our distinguished visitor. Dr. Payton.
Thank you, President Lewis. Before we start, we're going to have about a 15-minute question and answer period after the lecture. So should you have questions, use the QR code in your program or the QR code that's going to pop up on these screens and submit them. And at the end, Dean Wheeler will ask them of our esteemed lecturer. To read Nikki Finney in this, the sesquicentennial of our nation's founding, yes, in this specific moment of American history, is to have an experience of the uncanny. For some, this uncanny is the return of what our country has worked so hard to forget. That before Trayvon, Tamir, Breonna, there was Michael Stewart, Antonio Sullivan, the firebombing of Osage Avenue. It is to remember Mary, who sued the Lexington judge Samuel McDowell in 1799 for her freedom. For others, this uncanny is the experience of what W.E.B. Du Bois named in his essay of sorrow songs when he wrote, Ever since he was a child, these weird old songs in which the soul of the black slave spoke to men have stirred him strangely. They came out of the South, unknown to him, one by one, and yet at once he knew them as of him and of his. To put this in the language of James Baldwin, there is in gospel, jazz, and blues something tart and ironic, authoritative and double-edged, so that you cannot presume that the happy songs are happy and the sad songs are sad. No, joy and sorrow are intertwined, and gospel, yes, even gospel, is sensual. To read Nikky Finney is to hear black country. It is to remember black grannies and aunties, and to hear in lush and precise language a celebration of black history, black girls, black community. Differently, though, than Du Bois, those weird old songs did not walk to Nikky out of a South unknown to her, for she was born in Conway, South Carolina, 30 minutes from the Atlantic coast, and raised 80 miles further inland in Sumter. Her mother, Frances Davenport Finney, was an elementary school teacher who then directed the kindergarten at Morris College and then taught non-traditional students at the Vocational Rehabilitation Center and then served as director of student employment at the University of South Carolina, Sumter. Her father, Judge Ernest A. Finney Jr., was an attorney who in the 1960s defended more than 6,000 civil rights cases. And in 1994, after almost a decade of serving on the South Carolina Supreme Court, became the first African American since Reconstruction to be appointed to the position of Chief Justice of that court. This bears repeating. He was not the first black judge to serve as Chief Justice, but the first since the dismantling of Reconstruction in 1877. The 1876 elections were marked by violence and mass lynchings at Hamburg and Ellington. The corrupt bargain of 1877 brought the reforms to an end, and Jim Crow laws systematically began in violation of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, disenfranchising black folk all over again. These, then, are Nikky's parents, an educator and a jurist, both committed to sharing the lights of literacy and truth, of justice and love. And today, in the 250th year of our nation, even as our national parks system removes exhibits about racial injustice, we cannot forget this. We need to repeat this. African American history is American history. To remember this is to recognize who we are as a nation. It is to listen to the past so that we might change our ways. Nikky attended Talladega College in Alabama and graduated in 1979. She made her way to Atlanta, where she was part of the Pomoja Writers Collective led by Tony Cade Bambara. After the publication of her first collection, On Wings Made of Gauze, in 1985, she moved to the Bay Area. In 1989, she took a visiting writer position at the University of Kentucky. She published her next 4 books while living in Lexington, garnering a PEN Open Book Award for one of them and a National Book Award for another along the way. In 2013, Nikky left the University of Kentucky, where she held the Guy Davenport Chair of English, to return to her birth state. This move not only took her home, but has let her care for her parents. She currently holds the John H. Bennett Jr. Chair in Southern Letters and Literature at the University of South Carolina. Her most recent book, published in 2020, is Love Child's hotbed of occasional poetry, poems, and artifacts. Each poem contains an epigraph that begins, on the occasion of the unveiling of Amy Sherrill's official portrait of the First Lady of Arms, Michelle Obama. On the occasion of George J. Stinney Jr., 14, the youngest to die in the electric chair in these United States of America. On the occasion of being told a black woman was walking from Biloxi, Mississippi to Washington, D.C., topless and without her breasts, and so on. In her hands, the occasional poem can turn into lyrical history, into a love letter for another poet, into a eulogy for an elephant matriarch poached for her tusks, into a celebration of the lyric theater as a site of black joy, into a lament that is also an indictment of the justice system by a father for the murder of his violin-playing daughter. To read Nikki is to hear the echo of those old weird songs. It is to hear something tart and ironic, authoritative and double-edged that comes and kills us softly. To read her is to remember that poetry happens in the key of life. With no further ado, this evening's Kenan lecturer, Nikki Finney.
I believe that was the most beautiful introduction I have ever heard of myself. I thank you, Jeremy. Good evening, everybody. Dear Congressman John Robert Lewis, there was a colossal sweetness about you that some mistook for weakness, a sweetness that seemed to power your actions and blanket your life. Seems to me it was a particular kind of sweetness that was perhaps first thrown about your shoulders for protection, perhaps from your large and loving family, and then again rooted in that same soil by perhaps all that tamburining and lightning bolt words you soon discovered in those second and third hand books in that small segregated schoolhouse in Pike County, Alabama. Those same books that you soon learned were the perfect size for marching off into battle with. John Robert Lewis, this sweetness I speak of continued to be nurtured in you even as you grew from a black boy stowed away in a corner of the American South to a black man walking the halls of Congress for 13 terms from the 5th District of Georgia. Even as men who did not know your powerful sweetness charged at you on bridges with nightsticks and bully punches, intending to beat the love out of you, the love that seems to me fragments of might have been found inside of some of those books you always kept close in your backpack. It was never a secret how much you loved books and how books gave you the power to love people back no matter what. I've been looking for your powerful Kilimanjaro sweetness everywhere, John Robert Lewis. I need it now more than ever. I don't want it like a pill I might pop when my anger rises with the news of the new day. I want it like a backpack. Something I might put on and tighten around my shoulders and not take off until bedtime. Something heavy that has the power to pull back my shoulders. A John Robert Lewis backpack, jetpack, power pack, filled with a powerful sweetness in the face of no matter what. A fuel thing that would lift me away from all the hatred I hear swirling around in the air today. I've been trying to keep what you taught me top of mind because what I really want to do is punch every booming, bombastic, ruthless, treacherous liar in the mouth. But I was taught differently. People are dying because of lies. People are in hiding because of lies. Hundreds, thousands of people dying and losing everything they have ever worked for because other people do not care if they live or they die. I have not been feeling very nonviolent since you left, and so I decided to begin my new days here on earth without you, here in my trusty writing chair, engaged in the great epistolary tradition of reaching out to you in the only way I trust. Tonight I am remembering that sweet story of you wanting to go to school when you were 6 or so, your father waking you early that morning to tell you to go to the fields to work rather than to school to read. It is only one of the stories that was sent back and forth across the community switchboard during the week of your crossing over. I can hear the rich inflection of your southern voice as you retell that story that to me defines you so deeply. There you were, hiding beneath the porch, waiting for the right moment to hightail it to the school bus in order to get a day in with the books before you owed your father 2 days in the field. You and I both know that sweetness can often be attached to disobedience and that it can turn and follow a boy or girl until they begin to understand its full power, and only then can they turn and follow it right back without hesitation. I believe we might have shared knowledge of the sweetness that can sometimes be found in books. But John Lewis, they are banning some of the books you love so much, the books that made you who you were. You were a Dust Bowl boy, born a generation after the boll weevil and the Great Migration, and therefore there are so many reasons you could have but never left the South where you were first handed a beat-up book and locked out of every library because of the color of your skin. But you never left us. We know this like we know our family names. I was 7 when you woke up on what was to be Bloody Sunday, March 7, 1965. Tell me, kind sir, how is sweetness maintained when someone wakes and knows he is about to be beaten and about to go to jail or worse? Is the secret found in what he packs in his bag for that day? Where does one even find and purchase a backpack in rural Alabama in 1965? And why is your coat not the color of war or camouflage? Why is it the color of eggnog or ice cream or the first light that pierces the morning mother of pearl clouds? You ready to march with your 1 apple, your 1 orange, your 2 books. Thomas Merton was one of them. The Trappist monk, the theologian, the mystic, the social activist, the member of Abbey of Our Lady of Gethsemane. You knew what you were doing when you chose a poet for protection. These books you chose were your anchors, there to weigh you down and keep you closer to the earth when the random tossing of bodies began, and you knew it would begin. Your toothbrush and toothpaste packed and ready there with you, not because you cared so much about your own mouth that was about to be filled with blood, but because you knew before the night was through, you would be around other people, those fighting alongside you in a small jail cell. And you said later you thought it prudent, thoughtful, to be able to brush your teeth for them. John Robert Lewis, there is a colossal and powerful sweetness about you that I never took for weakness. I need it with me right now and tomorrow. I need it now because they are dismantling and destroying Black history courses and historical markers, because rule of law is now on the chopping block. I need it now because they have unhooked and towed away the mail sorting machines in the post office. I need to be able to store tanks of your opulent sweetness for all the terrifying days ahead. I need tanks filled with your unshakable human understanding of who I need to be when the buckets of human spit start flying my way and the stolen sorting machines that have been rolled away block me from what I need to keep my mind on. When the new fire hoses hit me and my brothers and sisters pouring into the streets and cities and small towns, I need to restudy the molecular design of your sweetness and remember how it did not shrink away under the hooves of horses coming straight at you. You were a sweet and powerful man, John Robert Lewis, walking through the fire of your time. You were a man who somehow became sweeter the more fire he was forced to eat. Maybe that is the key. Maybe that is the sign you will send me through the clouds. Rest now. Read now. We will take it from here. Good evening, Transylvania. This is something that I wrote called Poetry, the Influencer. Don't ask me where it came from. Hopefully you will hear in the body of the piece. But I wanted to say good evening. I wanted to say it's good to be back in my home of 26.6 years. Good evening, Appalachian poets, keepers of the high lonesome flame of African Appalachian stories for so long, 35 years, you're just getting started. Good evening, everybody. These are indeed the Transylvania University days of our beginning, the wonderful theme you have chosen to interrogate this year in all the ways we humans should do so. To everybody listening, everybody feeling what they are feeling, everybody with a heart beating and making its music in its own particular way, I have come to be with you, and most especially to be in conversation with you. I can't wait for the Q&A. I feel your presence here, from here to there, and from there to here. To every heart that walked in tonight that cares about poetry, that cares about democracy and justice, that cares about truth, that cares about the person sitting next to you, even if you don't know their name, and the world waiting for us just outside our doors. Let us share something tonight that we need. I will tell you now that I find myself these days quite filled with emotion, no matter what I am doing, and tonight is no different. But I have no fear, you have no fear, that I am not afraid of my emotions. So much feels on the line across the world. I will not avoid mixing what I know with what I feel, and add that I am unashamedly visually inclined. So I will also tell you that I think of my emotions as having their own hands and feet, something that I cannot do without. Because you had the audacity to invite a poet, as Dr. Lewis said, to offer your Kenan lecture this year, and because the woman who accepted your invitation was once also a girl whose mother and grandmother used to say at least 5 times a week, both with their southern mama mouths, "Watch your language, girl," which they meant as a warning. But that girl, this woman standing before you, took that warning literally to mean back then, really? Really? You mean watch my language? You know, look at it, hold it up to the light, put it under the heat lamp and the heart microscope? So being the dutiful, obedient girl that I was, that I am, that is what we will do tonight. I know they were trying their best to establish who was the boss and who was the child, the little human in training, we call her. But I was already thinking about words, all the words in the air around me. I was already beginning to fall in love with words, their sonic, literal, historic, perpendicular meanings when strung together. So tonight, naturally, we begin and end with words. Why? Because I've been noticing in these extraordinary, unfolding, terrifying, authoritarian-driven days that some words seem to be having a harder time than usual. Some words that have led us to each other a long time ago, some words filled with some inseparable human truth, seem to be getting banned and bullied along with the books. Some very powerful and necessary words seem more and more every day to be abandoned, thrown to the side of the road out of fear or trepidation, and perhaps these words seem as if they might not have a great champion. I promise you they do. Transylvania, do you read the root definitions of words for heart exercise like I do? 1, to influence. The meaning reads, the power or capacity to cause an effect in indirect or tangible ways without apparent exertion of force or direct exercise of command. So you see where the title is kind of coming from. Influencer, someone who builds a grassroots online presence through engaging content such as photos, videos, and updates. This is done by using direct audience interaction to establish authenticity, expertise, and appeal, and by standing apart from traditional celebrities by growing that person's platform through social media rather than pre-existing fame. Whew. When society, this is a quote, when society is made up of men who know no interior solitude, it can no longer be held together by love. Consequentially, it is held together by violent and abusive authority. Thomas Merton said that. Was this on your mind, John Robert Lewis, as you joined the others who knew right from wrong, who had gathered to also march together for what in your mind was the right thing to do? Another quote, the beginning of love, Merton said, is the will to let those we love be perfectly themselves, the resolution not to twist them to fit our own image, all those different living and looking people coming together to march on that day, John Robert Lewis, black and white, straight and gay, trans, young and old, brown people, cooks and maids and teachers and priests and nurses, all with the resolution not to twist anyone out of their own image by denying them health care or permission to be. Merton went on to say, the whole idea of compassion on page 17 in No Man is an Island is based on interdependence of all living beings, which are all part of one another and all involved in one another. That's who we are in this room tonight. But this one, John Lewis, this one, when, pray tell, on Bloody Sunday morning, were you thinking about this one? Quote, we are all so obsessed with doing that we have no time and imagination left for being. As a result, men are valued not for what they are, but for what they do or what they have for their usefulness. End quote. These are the kinds of words, the kind of language that you packed inside your nylon backpack, I bet, just before men who had been taught by their own influencers that you were exactly the kind of man born to be beaten down, so they beat you bloody, John Lewis. There are men and women alive today who've been given the immoral authority to repeat what they did to you 70 years ago. I see them on the news. They move like ghosts. They appear, they disappear, they appear again, pummeling the beautiful defenders of our democracy. I will bet you $5, John Lewis, they have no internal solitude to speak of. Merton, the poet, influencing you, John Lewis, and you influencing me now in return, not directly, just indirectly, directly affecting me without apparent exertion of force. Words and the language they make between us. The words we speak and the language it generates is one of those primary, highly unique activities for us human being animals. Language makes and keeps us who we are to ourselves and to each other. After almost 40 years of teaching and being in conversation with other humans about words and language, I really think one of our great failings of modern society might be that we don't invest enough time and attention in the great and necessary truth that complex language really is the game changer for us upright, bipedal Homo sapiens, the thing that distinguishes us humans from other animals. In these extraordinary days unfolding all around us, I quietly think about this too much. Recently, the word influencer arrived in my inbox, and ever since I have been falling asleep with it there under my tongue. It landed with quite a lemony taste. This is obviously a 21st century social, technical, modern definition, one that I tend to veer away from since I have no desire for a grassroots online presence or platform, and still prefer the mighty Dewey Decimal System to any sexy algorithm. But my students always bring me back to earth and tell me that influencers, professor, are all the rage. So let them be all the rage, and let me be a poet. When I think of influencers or influences beyond my family and my first community, I think of John Lewis. I think of ideas and beliefs that arrived and made some kind of soft but intense impression on me without the use of force. But with them and because of them, I have been able to shape myself into myself and walk right out of the long line of other human beings who sounded and acted so much alike that they could have been made by an AI-generated algorithm 60 years ago. The part of the definition of to influence that I especially love is this part: the capacity to alter or shape without direct force. No threat, no fear, nothing punctured nor pounded, only a feeling of curiosity and wonder, something that made something inside me not look away but look toward or untoward. It seems to me that to influence is to provide some kind of magical space to mingle, to mix, to test, to throw some idea or belief up into the air and then walk into it like a burst of brilliant powder. No paid subscription, no algorithm needed. I don't have to count how many likes come my way by the end of the day. I don't have to sign up for anything. I don't have to fear retribution from anyone or try. I only have to wander into the words or the life or the thinking and bring its fine water to my lips to give it a taste. I only have to try it on to see if it might fit. My responsibility in seeking influence from people, places, or things is to simply pay attention and to not be afraid to say to myself as I walk away, this just doesn't feel right. My influencers came to me and still come to me, floating and screaming and whispering from inside the quiet pages of books, by way of the long rambling railroad tracks of human words and language. Only the poets, by which I mean all artists, are finally the only people who know the truth about us. Soldiers don't know, statesmen don't know, priests don't know, union leaders don't know. Only the poets, Appalachian poets. James Baldwin, 1962. He didn't say that Appalachian poets thing, but he did say that poets thing. From the artist's struggle for integrity. I was 5 when these words were first spoken into the American air. It would take decades before they reached my hungry ears, but their influence was immediate. They mixed with my respect for poets and my love for the power of words and crawled inside me and have never left. Their indirect, direct force, their life-altering light and permission has remained my armor in a world hell-bent so many times on destroying whatever small successes we have had as a country founded on the massacre of Native people in the 250-plus years of chattel slavery behind us? ? Only the poets. Who else would say that but James Baldwin? Only the poets, and by the poets I mean the artists who know what it feels like to be human, what it is like to weep, to feel pain, to know love, to lose hope, to hope again. The poets are the only ones who know all about us. I gotta read this again. Statesmen don't know, sorry. Priests don't know, forgive me. Politicians don't know. Baldwin said this. My modern day add-on, my letter back to Jimmy Baldwin, because I'm always writing back to Jimmy Baldwin in my journal books. Jimmy, the poets, and by the poets I mean the artists in every state of the Union, South Carolina, Kentucky, Minnesota, Georgia, in every country, including Canada and Greenland, Iran, Palestine, there or near the front lines, fighting authoritarian regimes, writing their reports about who we are as human beings. Reports that must be written and read aloud concerning men and women in their daylight masks with their weapons drawn and without their names stitched on their front pockets of their uniforms, claiming absolute power, not in the name of America, the beautiful 250-year-old land of immigrants and diversity, but in the name of simple, absolute, corrupt power and control. John Lewis, Jimmy Baldwin, left us everything we need to know about which path to take. We don't have to look very far for what we need in order to respond to America in a very American way. I gotta read it again. Only the poets said Jimmy Baldwin. And what Baldwin said influenced me to say, and by the poets I mean the ICU nurse and the mothers at the protest with children waiting for them to come home, and the students with their tell the truth and shame the devil hearts who have seen and felt and had enough of a country they no longer recognize as being theirs. James Baldwin, essayist, novelist, poet, who understood the role of poets, not because we were special or divine or rare, but because they must live an uncompromising life in their daily reports back to their communities. That the poets could never compromise honesty or integrity. Whew, there are two words. These ones who were absolutely responsible for never letting truth be bought or sold like some kind of Washington Post on a Friday afternoon or sullied by the power of anyone. Baldwin reported to the poets unborn and the poets coming into their own. Quote, this force which you didn't ask for, this force of your pen, and for this destiny which you must accept is also your responsibility. And if you survive it, if you don't cheat, if you don't lie, it is not only your glory, your achievement, it is almost our only hope, the country's only hope, the world's only hope. Quote again, poets write about what it is like to die or to have somebody die, what it is like to be glad. Hymns don't do this. Churches really cannot. The trouble is that although the artist can do it, the price that he has to pay and that you, the audience, must also pay is a willingness to give up everything, to just listen to me, to realize that although you spent 27 years acquiring this house, this furniture, this position, although you spent 40 years raising this child, these children, none of it belongs to you, to us. You can only have it by letting it go. You can only take it if you are prepared to give. And giving is not an investment. It is not a day at the bargain counter, Baldwin said. It is a total risk of everything, of who you are and who you think you are, who you think you'd like to be, where you'd like to go, everything. As I grew into my long feet and my long body, I grew into James Baldwin's words. I realized his argument of only the poets and warning had attached itself to me with little twist ties and soft arrows and wings, and that while society, for the most part, relies on established institutions, the army, the political arena, the religious choir, not even the beautiful walking monks with their amazing aloka, the peace dog, these groups do not necessarily face and wrestle with the hard truth of us, like poets, of who we are, of who we'd like to be. They don't really make it a point to get their hands dirty and deal with the most uncomfortable of our realities as human beings. Hymns don't do this. Churches really cannot. And so from one influencer from the 20th century named Baldwin, who passes his words on to another, bringing up the rear, we move. In 1993, Toni Morrison, in her Nobel laureate address, who left everything to us that we ever needed to know about words and language, whose birthday was yesterday, happy birthday, Toni Morrison, and who left us a 20th century atlas of where we are and where we must fight and hold fast to in our human history when it comes to word and language. To all the dead language swirling around us in these extraordinary days, I dedicate these words from Toni Morrison. Quote, "A dead language," she said, "is an unyielding language, content to admire its own paralysis." I am not a Baptist preacher, but a dead language is ruthless in its policing duties. It has no desire or purpose other than maintaining the free range of its own narcotic narcissism, its own exclusivity and dominance. It actively thwarts the intellect, stalls conscience, suppresses human potential, unreceptive to interrogation. It cannot form or tolerate new ideas, shape other thoughts, tell another story. This is still a quote. Fill baffling silences, official language smitherized to sanction ignorance and preserve privilege is a suit of armor polished to shocking glitter, a husk from which the night departed long ago. Yet there it is, a dead language, dumb, predatory, sentimental, exciting reverence in school children, providing shelter for despots, summoning false memories of stability, harmony among the public, end quote. The original influencers, dear students of mine, who never wanted to be labeled influencers, have left us an atlas of words to follow. Only the poets, it might begin. Official language smitherized to sanction ignorance and preserve privilege. It goes on to say, we already have everything we need to know about the historical moment we are standing in the middle of. Quote, "The systematic looting of language can be recognized by the tendency of its users to forego its nuanced, complex, midwifery properties for menace and subjugation. Oppressive language does more than represent violence." Transylvania, it is violence. Please remember this from everything I said tonight. Real influence does not happen by way of an executive order. Real influence can be stored and kept for the next generation in an ice cream-colored backpack. Quote, "The language that drinks blood, laps vulnerabilities, tucks its fascist boots under crinolines of respectability and patriotism as it moves relentlessly toward the bottom line and the bottomed out mind. Toni Morrison. Baldwin, the great influencer of more than poets, of people who wanted to hear somebody, anybody, say something that didn't have a dollar sign tacked to it or a Bitcoin machine, believed that artists must push and disturb the peace in order to reveal the truth waiting just beneath the surface. Only the poets, he whispered into the segregated days of the 1960s. Nobody called us our truest name and articulated it as beautifully as James Baldwin. This is a time, he said, when something awful is happening to a civilization, when it ceases to produce poets. And what is even more crucial is when it ceases in any way whatsoever to believe in the report that only poets can make, end quote. James Baldwin always said a mouthful. Do you remember when he said this? Quote, some people wish to colonize the moon. Wonder who that might be. I'm not dropping any names tonight. Oh, back to the quote. Some people wish to colonize the moon, and others dance before it as an ancient friend. 1972. You invited a poet of her time to speak with you tonight, and it is she who stands proudly before you. I am influenced by so many different things. Influenced by inventive black patents that newly freed and formerly enslaved people walked from Kentucky to Washington, D.C. I am influenced by the beautiful word autodidactic. Love that word. Influenced by every high and low note of Marian Anderson standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and Leontine Price at the Met Opera, two daughters of those formerly enslaved singing their American songs. I have come tonight to sing to the poets and to those who would dare come and listen to the report that only a poet can make. I have a poem for you. It is by the Palestinian-American poet Naomi Shihab Nyai about the making of meaningful connections in our daily life and how to prioritize those connections over all the noise that is around us. Famous. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous briefly to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to the floor. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets, sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in the way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do. I wish each of us a very Naomi Shihab Nyai famous life, where we make necessary, essential connections with things that matter. May we always remember there is always something we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Finney, for your powerful words. It is now time for our question and answer period. And so I'm actually starting off with a couple that I'm going to combine.
Okay.
So the first part of the question is, what was one of your favorite books as a child? And then another question asks, what is a book everybody should read?
My mother is a school teacher, and so I don't remember the first book I read. I think it was this, you ever seen that old book with the clock on the front? And it has, you move the hands on the clock, and I still have that book on my desk. It's crazy. I read all the Nancy Drew books, every one. I still have them. If anybody needs a case of Nancy Drew, just let me know. I'm kind of downsizing these days. I read a lot of books about animals. I was an animal girl. Books about dogs. I read books about the ocean because I was born so close to it, and I had never seen down under the ocean. So all pictures of the ocean fascinated me. Yeah, that's like saying what child is best. I loved reading because my mother sat me in her lap and taught me it was the most powerful thing I could do with my eyes and my mind and my life, and it came true. Again, I can't just tell you one book. I can tell you that you need to know who Rachel Carson was. Mm-hmm. And I want you to find some of her books about the ocean. They're very old and very relevant. She was one of my influencers as well. I think that, again, you know, I was in Virginia a couple of months ago, and this young poet, very excited, in a crowd of 1,000 people, said, "Please tell me what to read to become a poet." And I said, "Everything." Popular Mechanic, the dictionary, the synonym finder, the 1898 book on Crayola crayon names. And she said, "But why everything?" And I said, "Because you don't know what you will need to complete the poem that you haven't written yet." So it's not just about one book, you know? It's about, one of the things I was telling a friend of mine yesterday is, like, when I left Lexington after 26.6 years, I really went into a kind of mourning because I had never lived in a community that loved books so much. People walking down the street reading books, people at the gas station reading books, Joseph Beth, Wynn's bookstore, people, 1,000 poetry books of mine were sold at Wynn Morris's bookstore when I won the National Book Award. That would not have happened in South Carolina, which is my home state. Sorry, South Carolina. It just would not have, and I never take that for granted, a love for books and a love for reading and a love for the life of the mind, which is why Transylvania's invitation to me and to others is so important. Because as institutions and as teachers and as people who love the life of the mind, we must fight for the life of the mind. And we can't just sit off on the side and say, well, things will get better. Oh, that wasn't a question. I'm sorry.
Thank you. The next question. When was the first time you associated the label poet with yourself?
Ooh, that was a long road. Because when you honor Langston Hughes and Gwendolyn Brooks and Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and Haki Marubuti and Robert Frost and County Cullen and on and on and on and on, and you put these people up and around you and you read them and you fall asleep with them under your pillowcase, you don't really, in my estimation and in my family, you don't just suddenly call yourself a poet. So I don't remember the time or the day, but I remember I had worked on a poem really, really hard. It wasn't in my teenage years. It probably wasn't in my early 20s, and it probably was somewhere in my latter 20s or early 30s when I said, okay, I have earned the right to call myself a poet. And that's true. That's just how I felt about the word, and that's how I still feel about the word. And when I feel myself being casual about something I'm working on, I won't wear my poet shirt. I have a shirt that says poet right here. I was like, you can't put that on. Nope.
Okay. Another question asks, what has been your favorite thing to write experience-wise? And what comes to your mind first when you start your writing process?
Visuals, images come first. I love the visual image. In terms of my senses, it's all there, but especially I love ekphrastic poetry for that reason, because when I walk into a museum or a space, a gallery, if I hear music, it's always stimulating. And so I love the visual, and that's how it typically starts for me as a poet, and then it continues on to or you don't start editing, you put everything in the bowl, and then you start wondering how to invite you in to that space, because I'm not writing for me. I do that in my journal book. I'm writing to have a conversation with somebody who might pick up that book or might be in an audience like this and leave with something in their pockets. Those are the poets that were my influencers, and that I believe if I'm just gonna jump up on this really nice podium and start screaming something and you're not gonna hear what I have to say, then that's really about my ego more than my desire to create something as a gift.
Okay. The next question is, how have places influenced you?
Great question. Geographies, land, the ocean. One of my first poems I ever really, when I felt like a poet, was a poem I was writing for Jacques Cousteau, because, again, I had not seen the bottom of the ocean. I hadn't seen what the inside of the sea looked like. And back in the 1960s, there's this little machine popping down. Some of you with gray hair know what I'm talking about. And Jacques Cousteau was taking us to the bottom of the ocean. They were taking us into sand. We were seeing animals and creatures that we had never seen before. And so that was something that was very important to me. I was recalling that memory as a girl and how it opened up the path to then go find Rachel Carson and the work she had done in her life to save those waterways. It's the work that we are now pushing to the side. My fear is that all of that good environmental work is going to be lost, but I don't think so. I think people are getting the message and joining different kinds of organizations and groups to fight back in that way, because we can't lose the 100 years that we have spent trying to be better stewards of the land and the sea.
Okay. How long does it take to make a poem or a story?
Oh, forever. It's never done. It's never done. It's a process. I'll just say that. There's an artist in South Carolina right now by the name of Leo Twiggs who has a 50-year retrospective at the Gibbs Museum in Charleston, and Jeremy talked a little bit about my penchant for writing poems about occasional poems. I never got the memo that occasional poems were bad. Like, if you're gonna be a poet, don't be an occasional poet because you'll get slotted in some sort of, oh, she writes occasional poetry. What poem isn't an occasional poem, right? So anyway, I wrote this poem for Leo Twiggs and his 50th retrospective, and I had to do all this research. I love research as a poet. And so I did like 7 days of research. I compiled a lot of information. And then there was one video where he was talking about how as a 14, 15-year-old black boy in St. Stephen, South Carolina, he had become the projectionist at the segregated movie theater, and how he ran the projector up in the bird's nest. Nobody saw him, but he would put Casablanca on, Gone with the Wind, all of these films. And when you look at Leo Twiggs' work, you see these profound images, right? Again, a visual journey. And I thought, nobody has ever put together the projectionist with this incredible visual artist. And so the poem is called The Projectionist. And the Gibbs wrote it, you know how you write some of the narrative on the wall itself. And so if you go to the Gibbs in Charleston between now and May, you'll see this poem that I wrote for him on the wall. I'm really proud of it because I often say that as a poet and as a writer, I look for a window. I tell my students, don't come through the door says exit, the door says enter. Come through a window. Is there a crack somewhere where a little thing of light? Come through that, because that perspective will be your perspective, and it will give the listener or the reader a different view on the subject that you were thinking about. So when I found The Projectionist, and then he went on to Claflin College and to Orangeburg to become the projectionist there. So his entire young adulthood was spent staring at how an image cinematically moves across, right, the canvas. And then he became a visual artist. So I love the work of poetry, and I love the research of poetry because I can find something unique. I don't want to write the same poem, and I don't want people to say, oh, that sounds like a Nikki Finney poem.
Great. Okay, this actually relates to a couple of questions.
Did you write these poems, these questions, or did they really come from the audience?
They came from the audience.
Just kidding.
In a world where AI has been trained and retrained on every poem by every writer, with all the context of recorded history, does the role of the human poet change?
You said, say that again?
Okay. In a world where AI has been trained and retrained on every poem by every writer, with all the context of recorded history, does the role of the human poet change?
No. No. AI doesn't change the poet. Poet changes AI. I mean, we're giving too much space to this thing. I'm serious. I'm gonna have to put my hand on my hip like my mom does and say, this is really, we need to remember that we're humans. That's what part of this talk was about. It's like we have the power, and we're giving that power away so easily, We don't have to do that. And so, no, I don't think that is true at all. And I feel like it's almost the wrong, your question isn't wrong, but that kind of question lends itself to thinking of the overarching, all-encompassing power of AI. And I just don't think about it in that way. I don't. I think about this in that way. I think about this in this way, which is why I get off my phone more than I ever have, which is why I lick the tip of my pencil more than I ever have, and which I tell my students, and I can see it happening to them as well. And so I just feel like everything else in the world that is going through a transformation and going through a fight, you got to fight, and you got to put what you know forward in order to save that thing. And I'm not quiet about it at all.
Okay, thank you. And I think this will be the last question. When was a time when you experienced your sweetness being tied to disobedience, as you described John Lewis exemplifying?
Oh, my entire life. My entire life that has been, I like being kind, right? You are not gonna make me a mean and evil person. You can try all you want, right? But I love the kindness that my parents and my family and my community taught me. I love being sweet. I love being thoughtful. But I also know that you can, if that is who you are, if that is the influence that has come your way, I really understand that the realm of the emotions can also see that as in a light of disobedience, rather than being enraged, rather than having another reaction to something. So I just think human beings are complicated, and I don't think that you have to be one way to be seen as being one thing, but I do think that you have to be true to yourself. And what we are talking about tonight and what I was talking about is like, who do you want to be in the world? Who is that person? What do you want to be famous for? That poem just knocks me out every time I read it. I think about it all the time, and it really settles me. It positions me towards the light that I want to be thinking about and leaning into. So,
Okay. Thank you all for sharing your questions.
thank you all.
Now, hold on. Hold on. Next, we have a presentation of gift from the Black Student Alliance. And Christian Morenzi couldn't be with us, but we have Jatasia Pinckney.
Thank you so much. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Swag. Thank you.